Hello, so I am remaking my Living with Bipolar Disorder Type 2 video. I am going to leave the old one online because I do think it's got some really helpful things and I was quite pleased with the stuff I spoke about. I've basically gained another year of life, which is kind of what happens, you grow older. But I've kind of gained another year of insight into my mental illnesses. I've had a chance to step back and reflect on who I was, and I've just made some pretty big life changes. So for me, it's interesting to talk through what I have learned more about my bipolar disorder, but also kind of what this year has meant for me in terms of my bipolar disorder. So as you will have seen from my social media, if you do follow me on social media, I have got a very steady life now, which most people don't associate with bipolar disorder. If you look at my life on paper, I'm living with my boyfriend in a really stable relationship, and I've been with him for now 3 years. I'm not actually sure. I'm doing a grad scheme, a career that I really want to do, I can see myself staying in, and I have a dog. Like, I'm kind of gone from living this really chaotic lifestyle, whether that be, really peaked like moods or really low moods, to just steady. And like I said, that isn't what you normally associate with bipolar disorder. And I think this video is going to cover the little parts of my life that do show the more dysfunctional side of bipolar in my day-to-day life still, but I manage really quite well. And also, I think from this insight I've gained over the years, I naturally just keep myself steadier. First things first, what is bipolar disorder? And for me and the purpose of the video, what is bipolar disorder type 2? Bipolar disorder is a mental illness that is most known for its periods of elated mood and its periods of depression. Type 2, this is periods of hypomania, which is known as a lesser form of mania, and periods of depression. So hypomania is, like I said, the lesser form of mania, and the main symptoms or behaviours you'll see is stuff like less sleeping, a sense of euphoria, kind of putting yourself in dangerous situations from being impulsive. So this can be like excessive spending, substance abuse, kind of risky situations in terms of guys and stuff. What else? Hypomania. So you can get some people get really creative, some people take on a lot of responsibilities which they can't sustain, and it can be something that's filled with regret. So people having all this new bouts of energy and taking on all these things, they can then, when they come out of the hypomania, be a bit heck, what have I done? So then periods of depression, these are the same as what you'll find on Google about depression. So it's low mood, irritability, feeling anxious, struggling with sleep or sleeping too much, losing your appetite, getting an increased appetite, and have feelings of being suicidal, feelings of self-harm. I will link the Mind website below for all of this because I think Mind goes into the best descriptions of mental illnesses, and I've always found it to be most useful because you also get people's personal accounts, and yeah, it's a really good amount of detail. So where do I begin? I guess because of bipolar disorder, you can only get the diagnosis when they start to spot these patterns. When it's affected you for quite a long time, I think it'll be worth kind of running through my life in terms of bipolar disorder leading up to when I got diagnosed and then the years that followed. So here we go. So like I had mentioned in previous videos that I've now archived, I first started to really notice my struggle with mental illness around age 13 and 14, although unfortunately I didn't know what mental illnesses were due to a lack of education on it, not really seeing it social media on the news. So I was basically pretty depressed, and I didn't know that depression existed. I just thought I was sad and no one else in the world was sad around me, and I didn't know why. So this kind of went on and off until the age of 15, just around my 16th birthday, and this is when my depression got really bad. And in December, so early December, I made my first suicide attempt. Pretty bad times. So then I ended up in CAMS, which is the Child Adolescent Mental Health Services, and in typical CAMS style, they just put me on some medication, so good old fluoxetine, and what did they do? Oh yeah, they just said I had a low mood, and that was that. But then, so this is kind of thing number one. So if you've got bipolar disorder, they don't put you on just antidepressants. It's known to trigger the mania, and in my case hypomania episodes, and I think in some ways this kind of happened. So I was on fluoxetine from a really bad point of depression. I was suffering a bit with my eating disorder, and I just kind of went the opposite way. It's really difficult because in terms of hypomania, they're behaviours that you don't really want to talk about because some of them just present you in quite a bad way. People can't relate to, they just can't relate. And although I'm not ashamed of who I've been in these episodes, it's not something that I'm going to go into many details about in this video because it's just not stuff you disclose on the internet. Anyway, when I reflect on things, can kind of see that I may have had my first experience of a hypomanic episode at this point. I kind of went from this deep depression to a very elated mood, and the kind of behaviours I engaged in were kind of past my age. That's the only way I'll describe it. Like, I guess my inhibitions were so much lower. Inhibitions is, I don't know if that's even the right word. Like, so something about hypomania is that you've kind of got lower inhibitions to other people. Like, you don't see what is right and wrong in societal norms. And I know, like, we live in a world now where societal norms aren't what you live by, but like I said, for my age, I kind of surpassed what people would expect to be normal. So that was that. Stopped taking the medication because I thought I was better, so I just stopped taking it. And then I ended up actually taking a different medication when I just turned 17. So my birthday is near the start of the school year, which will hopefully make this video make a lot more sense. I then started on sertraline, and again, that's an antidepressant. You've got to be careful about that bipolar disorder, but obviously, like, when I was in CAMS, they just diagnosed me with a low mood. There was nothing to do with bipolar at this point. And also, they don't diagnose bipolar in your teenage years because they need to see if it is like a long-standing mental illness or teenage mood fluctuations, which I know that frustrates a lot of people that had early mental illnesses when CAMS just said it, you'll grow out of it. But anyway, so I again went into quite an elated mood. So the stuff I will talk about is taking on a lot more responsibility at school. So I went from, like I said, being really depressed around the age of 16, struggling to get through my GCSEs. I took quite a bit of time off school, didn't do any of my mocks and stuff, to suddenly in year 12 taking on so much. Like, I started an EPQ when I struggled, like I said, to even do my GCSEs. I went for like house captaincy role. I did more of my sports teams again. I did a lot of voluntary work. I did a lot of like doing stuff in schools because at one point I wanted to be a teacher. So like I said, I went from skipping a lot of school to all of this. And again, I can't be sure about this, but I don't know, for example, if the sertraline, so the antidepressant, triggered me into kind of more of this elated mood. So again, I stopped taking the sertraline just naturally because I thought, yay, I'm better. And this is what people often do when they start like antidepressants. When they get better, they just kind of stop taking it, especially when you're so young and you don't really understand it. So anyway, as exams kind of approached again, I got into over exercising and my eating disorder came back a little bit. I think for me, like when I felt my mood slip, I've always kind of turned to controlling my food, or my appetite's gone, and seeing the weight loss kind of just makes me go down that cycle because of early experiences. And then I ended up in quite a low place again, going into year 13. I was quite anorexic again around the time of my 18th birthday. It doesn't all fit around my birthday, but like I said, I think because it's like a date that stays in your head, it's a very easy time for me to relate experiences to. I wasn't on medication at this point, and then blah blah blah, skip a few months again, didn't do any mocks in year 13, was skipping quite a lot of school again because I was so depressed. I was also obviously anorexic at this point too, and then I got under the adults mental health services and I started seeing, oh wait no, let's just go back one step. So then December time, so 2 months after my birthday, my dad like asked me, will you go and see a private psychiatrist? Like, I really want you to start medication, because I think they were so scared I was going to get to the point I was suicidal again, like I was when I was 16. So I saw this private psychiatrist. I ran through my experiences. I talked to him about, you know, the slightly more off the rails parts of my life. I spoke to him about the depression, impulsivity I'd faced, and he was the first person to mention, like, I think you could have bipolar disorder type 2. But I kind of just walked away from this appointment because I think when you felt invalidated, so for example, when CAMS just said, you've got a low mood, you'll grow out of it, you don't take, like in your early experiences of a mental health professional then taking you seriously, you don't take much from it. And especially because this is the first appointment I had with this man, I was a bit like, look, you met me once. Like, he didn't have any of my medical notes because he was private. He didn't get to access my NHS notes. It was all from my personal account. But then I guess, like, if it was my personal account, it's not actually anyone's interpreted account of my life. I don't know. This is why I like making these videos. And you kind of figure out things that you haven't considered. So then, like, a month later, my referral went properly through to NHS services and I started seeing a psychiatrist there. I didn't give her my private notes because I wanted her to make her own opinion, and I started carbamazepine, which was a mood stabilizer, and I was quite depressed at this point, so I don't know if the carbamazepine helped, but I do know one thing: it didn't send me into an elated mood. I struggled then with binge eating actually, which was really quite difficult for me because I'd gone from being anorexic to gaining quite a lot of weight quite fast, and again struggled with my depression still. So I was on sertraline as well, but when you go on an antidepressant with a mood stabilizer, it doesn't, like, it kind of prevents the hypomania happening. I managed to get through my exams. I stopped taking my medication again because I don't know, I was just a bit stupid, and I kind of just went back into impulsive me. Not as impulsive as it had been, but I was living quite a reckless life. And anyway, so my time with the psychiatrist was coming to an end because I was going to university in a different city, and you can't stay in a mental health service if you've moved GP practice. And on my discharge letter, and I didn't know, I never discussed this with her, she put that she suspected bipolar disorder type 2. I actually didn't see this discharge letter for over a year. I didn't know anything about it. And like I said, she put suspected. With my medical history, with her knowing about my family's mental health history, that's kind of what led to some of it. And because this is all what she wrote in the letter. But yeah, like I said, I didn't see this for over a year. So then what happened? I went to uni, things were quite stable for a year. Yeah, like that year, first year of uni, I was just kind of normal. It's the most normal I'd felt, and there was no depression, there was no periods of like hypomania. And then the second year summer came around and I just went off the rails. I was putting myself in such dangerous situations. Like I said, it's kind of like I lost my inhibitions and I literally felt invincible. And I reflect on this time in my life and I think it's the happiest I'd ever felt. But then when I reflect on it, I'm a bit like, yeah, but Nick, you put yourself in some stupid situations. But anyway, I do still look back on this life quite fondly because I got some incredible friendships out of it. Like, I think the reason I find these friendships so incredible is that, like I said, I was pretty reckless. I was doing things that wasn't like normal and I was putting myself in stupid situations, but there was absolutely no judgment. And for me, that was what taught me what friendship was. This kind of continued on and off into my second year of uni. So like the thing about hypomania, it's not months and months or weeks and weeks like depression. It's more a few days at a time, and that's kind of what it was for me. I would kind of go through like a week or so of this and then kind of normality, like when, for example, I knew I had to focus on my lectures, and then it would like come around again. And I think it wasn't helped by how much we were drinking and stuff on nights out. Like when I did a psychoeducation course on bipolar, you kind of learn what kind of can trigger these episodes, and I think just uni's a natural environment of nights out. I just kind of kept triggering these hypomanic episodes. So that was that. Around February of my second year of uni, like a couple of friends were like, Nick, you need to see a doctor, I'm scared, because like I said, I was putting myself in such stupid situations. So I went to the GP, I kind of said what my friends had said, and they just told me I was too insightful. I couldn't have what was on that discharge letter, the bipolar type 2, which I just think is a bit dismissive, because I think you can have mental illnesses and be really insightful. I've also like always been quite aware of what I was when I was younger and just was sad but didn't know why. I had to look into a lot of stuff online because I just wasn't functional. And yeah, like I've had to learn from an early age a lot about my mental illnesses. So anyway, I just kind of walked away from that because, like I said, I was in a good mood. I wasn't in like a deep depression. I just thought like, what harm can this do? But then I was a bit more conscious of it. Like I did notice the reckless situations at this point and tried to tone it down. So then like life continued. I started to go into my third year of uni. I started to basically put my all. I went from basically not wanting a 2-1 anymore to wanting a first, and I think this is the start of my downhill patch again. It's kind of that whole thing where I felt kind of invincible. I took on a job at uni when I hadn't had a job at uni. I took on a committee role for this society I was in. I basically did that thing again where I took on a lot of responsibilities. So I went into my third year of uni, like I said, wanting a first, and I just couldn't sustain this energy I had. I couldn't sustain this feeling of being invincible, and things did start to go downhill. I'd also got into my relationship with my now boyfriend, and I think that knock from all the impulsive, dangerous and reckless situations I got myself into, especially when drunk, to this was kind of a bit of a shock to the system. Like I said, I was going into a stable relationship. So I got into a really bad depressive patch. It kind of just got worse and worse because I took on too much responsibility. I felt really overwhelmed. I felt like a burden. I struggled to face each day. I just cried a lot. So I got referral to adults mental health service again. I was fortunate, this went through really quick, like within 2 months, and I saw a psychiatrist within 2 months. I think part of it was because of my extensive mental health history on my records. I had, I think, 2 appointments with him, and he was like, you've got bipolar type 2, like there's no question about it. And my heart sunk, I think because of how I'd been dismissed like 6-ish months before when I'd gone to the GP. When I was younger and been seeking help for mental health, I just felt like if I had had this recognised sooner, I maybe would have been more aware of how my moods would dip, because when I was going through the hypomanic episode, like the 6 months, a year before I got this diagnosis, I literally thought I was invincible. It meant when the depression came around, it went bad. So I really struggled then going into Christmas. There was a couple of family problems. And like I said, I was still really overwhelmed with uni, had a lot of deadlines coming up, a few relationship problems because my life was just crashing around me. And my eating disorder then came back in January, which just didn't help anything at all. Then my depressive episode continued into just the next few months, and in May I attempted suicide again, which was just a bit rubbish. Oh yeah, I forgot to say, so around January time I started the medication I'm on now, but I had the reaction to it that it's like the rash you get all over your body, so I didn't try another medication. I told my psychiatrist I didn't want to try any different ones because some of them have like a side effect of weight gain, some of them make you more depressed before you get better, and the thought of all this in my depressive state I was in, the like anorexic state I was in, I was just like, I can't do it. So I was facing this depression not on any medication, and because of my diagnosis I couldn't go straight onto antidepressants. Anyway, like I said, was anorexic, attempted suicide again in May, was referred to the eating disorder services, and yeah, so I don't think for a long time I really got through this depressive episode. Like I said, the low I reached was the lowest point I'd reached, and I think because the eating disorder went alongside it, I just got so anxious as well. And like with bipolar, the depressive episodes can last months. So this kind of continued till like the following December. So I was basically depressed and had an eating disorder for a year. Then things kind of started to pick up again. I was going travelling in like 2 months. I had the job interview for this grad scheme I really wanted to go on. I was flying back from Thailand for this job interview. It was kind of crazy. I just kind of picked myself and sorted myself out. And like this is the thing I found about being bipolar. Obviously you can't just snap out of it, you can't just get better. But I think because my mental illnesses comes in waves of being really good, really bad, and sometimes just normal, I do recover from the depression, I think, easier than some people can. Obviously not when I'm in like the deepest of depressions, and I think because I'm insightful I can be aware of the more like hypomanic stuff. So anyway, I went travelling. This was still like quite a healing process. I kind of got better from my eating disorder, but then COVID happened, had to come back from my travelling. It was a bit rubbish, but I'm over it. And I kind of then just kept myself quite stable between like April time and pretty much now. The only thing I'd say is, so this is what I was going to talk about next. How can the bipolar traits, so the kind of hypomanic ones, display themselves when you're living like a stable life, stable relationship, etc. I mentioned earlier that hypomania can be quite impulsive, and one of the impulsions you can have is spending. And this is what my psychiatrist when I was 18 spotted as well. I would obsessively spend money on the same thing. For example, like most people just have a couple of pairs of earrings. I have probably 80 pairs, including the 23 pairs I've got on the way right now. And this is kind of what it got a bit like with summer. Like, I was buying quite a lot of plants. I would get sad when a garden centre didn't have a new plant or a new pot. Like, it's kind of quite strange. I still struggle with impulsivity on nights out, but not some of the reckless behaviours I got into, because like I said, I'm in a stable relationship. I do still take nights out quite far. So whereas most people would be home at like 3 a.m, I would be the one that's rocking up at 6 a.m. I'm just so chatty to everyone I know. Like when I was younger, I would know every single bouncer in town because of how chatty I was, how late I stayed out. And I still kind of have these relationships. Like, I'm still this really overly confident person. In those situations, for example, like January till now, threw myself into my work, took on more responsibilities, which I was worried I'd get more overwhelmed with again. But I think like I'm quite aware of this. And it's just the extent I go from 0 to 100. I'm being quite impulsive with some stuff in my evenings at the moment. Like I said, I've relapsed back into my eating disorder, and I think part of that is just to do with the impulsive behaviour. Like I've said, bulimia is like an impulse, it's a bit of an addiction, and I think unfortunately my bipolar kind of energetic state has manifested itself a little bit in this. But yeah, I'm on medication now. So the medication I tried 2 years ago, and I had the rash. I had to beg the psychiatrist to let me try it and again, because this rash is quite dangerous, and he did, and I've managed to tolerate it this time. And I think this has helped me stay quite stable. Like, I think COVID at this point had the chance to make me quite depressed, but it's kind of kept me on a relatively good level. Whereas before I struggled with not having the extremes with my hypomania. I'm good with my stable life now. Like, although I've got the small impulsions, it's nothing severe, but I'm no longer chasing it. Because the thing about hypomania, obviously, I described, for me, it was quite a happy state. I was euphoric, I felt invincible. Like, I can just miss it sometimes, but I am settling into this more stable life, and I genuinely think the lamotrigine is helping. I think I didn't describe this past year very well, but I hope this video has helped people understand like how it can display itself, how my diagnosis came about, and just kind of the journey I've been on with it. It is the periods, like it isn't like fleeting mood swings day to day. It is like months of depression, weeks of depression, and then the hypomania is at least a few days, if not like a week or so. But yeah, again, if anyone has any questions about anything I've said, I've linked my 3 Instagram accounts below again. I don't think I'll talk too much about bipolar on here because I don't have too much else to say, to be honest. But if there is anything people want to see or hear about, I will happily talk about it. So yeah, thanks for listening again, and you've got another video coming up either before or after this one called Bulimia and Me.